Have you ever attempted to solve a household issue only to find an unanticipated one? Have you ever imagined that one of the biggest shocks of your life might result from a simple house repair? I had the exact same experience. What began as a simple plumbing repair evolved into a discovery I never anticipated, and it completely altered my life. I'll explain how. Amy, a 34-year-old woman, and I, a 44-year-old man, have been together for about 9 years. I don't mind that we aren't married. Our families occasionally visit and stay with us on the weekends because they know one another. We're doing well, or at least I believed we were. Although we don't yet have children, we do have 2 cats and a mortgage that she occasionally helps with. I would characterize how we were living as comfortable. Amy and I met by accident in a playground, of all places. Amy was there with a friend who had children, and I was there with my niece. I am trying to remember what started the discussion. I do remember that I didn't want it to stop. I was rusty around women and had been alone for a long time, but that wasn't the only factor. She was younger than me, and we had a conversation I hadn't had in a long time. Although our discussion was enlightening, I had essentially solidified the idea that younger women were not attractive then. I'm an introvert, with little time for relationships when I'm not traveling for work. As expected, she refused to give me her number when I asked for it in the park. The prospect of getting a much younger woman like her to consider me immediately captivated me. It's one way to know that despite your age, you still have some influence. But I wasn't going to give up so quickly because I knew the person she was hanging out with at the playground. After a week, I found myself again at the playground, but this time without my niece, who had returned to her parents' house. However, Amy's friend was present. I remained calm and got her to give me Amy's phone number. It took a lot of effort, but she claimed to have noticed how well we clicked that day and to be sick of Amy whining about not being in a relationship. We clicked right away once I messaged her. I hosted our first date at my house. After that, things proceeded rather swiftly. She moved in within 6 months. Although I didn't ask her to, it seemed like a logical next step. She already had some clothing and a toothbrush at my house, and gradually, she stopped returning to her apartment. When her lease expired, we both thought, why not? No more lonely evenings after returning from a trip, I thought. It was much closer to work for her. We became accustomed to our routine. Up until everything began to fall apart, life was simple. I didn't have a "I suspected something was wrong" moment until I realized something was amiss. I didn't give it much thought, even though she had been going out more frequently, hanging out with the girls and returning home later than usual. Given that she was young, I assumed that this was typical. I know we have a significant age difference, which many of you will probably criticize. Still, I also understand that certain things are inevitable when there is such a difference. After all, I could no longer keep up with folks her age. Everyone needs space, and I've never thought of myself as a needy person. Although it wasn't typical of her and did happen abruptly, I still had faith in her. Now, I've always been the one to fix household issues. I mean, if I want to be the head of the household, I must be the head. I have, therefore, always been helpful. Despite my lack of formal training, I can typically solve most problems at home with the help of the internet and common sense. I returned home early from a work trip one week. Even though I was only meant to be gone for 2 weeks, I could finish everything in half that time. I intended to surprise her. She looked shocked when I went in, as if she had been caught entirely off guard but also angry. Strange behavior, but I dismissed it without giving it any thought. Then, she behaved like an average person. Since the kitchen sink had been leaking for some time, I decided to fix it the next day when she was at work. It was one of those minor irritations I kept putting off, nothing big. Whatever the odd response she had given me the day before, I thought I'd take it on and win her over. I was tinkering with the pipes beneath the sink when I saw something strange. 2 wine glasses with some wine remaining in each were hidden far behind the pipes. The problem is that I don't drink wine. It didn't appeal to me. I've always liked beer and glasses are optional. However, Amy enjoys drinking wine, and her best friend gives her a special wine glass. I didn't even recognize these spectacles. They weren't hers and weren't the ones we typically wore. I was unaware that we even had such glasses. I realized then that there was undoubtedly a problem. I didn't even talk to her about it. Even though I knew her well, I still had preconceived notions about younger women. If I started questioning the twin wine glasses under the sink, I would come across as suspicious or unsure of her. I didn't want to be responsible for the emotional consequences of that. Instead, I began to listen more intently. Before any allegations, at least I could collect additional information. I began to notice things I had not seen. She was going out much more than usual, had grown aloof, and was more guarded by her phone and iPad. She would dress up and pretend she was going to a hip club or restaurant to meet her pals on Wednesdays and Fridays, her girls' nights. Before that, I had been so overburdened with work that I only realized. I hadn't asked many questions before, but I decided to start after locating those spectacles and observing the behavioral changes. I asked her casually where she would meet her friends later that same week that I had discovered the glasses. She gave me the name of an ordinary eatery. I decided to check the location sharing feature we had configured on our phones years prior, an hour after she had left. I had never used it before, but I did this time, which was for emergencies. As it turned out, she wasn't at the restaurant she claimed to be at. Her position instead pinged at a duplex on the other side of town. I also monitored her whereabouts for the upcoming few Wednesdays and Fridays. It always happened that she was at that duplex. I didn't know its location, but she lied to me because she wasn't at any restaurant. Perhaps she was there with her pals. I felt like my entire world was falling apart. Who knew how long this had been going on? I also felt pretty damned foolish that I was only now noticing. I needed to know who she would see because I was furious. I looked it up online and discovered 2 renters lived in the duplex. One was a woman whose name I didn't know, but I found the other one, a man named Jake, much more intriguing. I saw his Instagram using the name from that search. He exuded confidence and posted a lot of gym selfies on social media. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, probably about the same age as Amy when we first met. I knew something was up because she had never brought him up before. I even installed a little GPS tracker in her car since I was desperate to claim that this was due to a bug in the location sharing feature. I looked at the tracker the following time she went out for one of her nights. As expected, she headed directly back to Jake's house. Amy was cheating on me by now, and I was unable to deny it any longer. The problem is that I didn't want to suddenly lose it and go up to her unprepared. I wanted additional evidence. Honestly, I had no idea how to initiate that discussion. So, I'm here to ask for your advice. What ought I to do? How do you even start to tackle such a task? Although I lack hard proof, I have evidence that most people would agree it only supports one theory. Finding those wine glasses was undoubtedly a warning sign, and my gut feeling to go further was right on the money. I need to know what I'm supposed to do. I wanted to approach her with a clear understanding of what was happening, so gathering proof seemed like the best course of action. I began writing down particular incidents that made me suspicious, such as her late-night outings, the abrupt secrecy surrounding her phone, and those enigmatic wine glasses. When I eventually addressed her, having these specific examples would help me keep the argument on track. I'm bracing myself for a range of responses. She might become defensive or angry or even surprise me by being honest. I'll have to consider why she needs to defend herself if she becomes defensive. People who respond in that manner usually have something to hide. Amy had been surreptitiously visiting Jake's apartment for weeks. I made the decision that I would not simply watch it unfold. I followed many people's advice to remain composed, get additional information, and hold off on making a big deal out of it. Though I wanted to be tactful and calculated, I tried to hit her where it hurt. I started by documenting everything. I took screenshots with my phone's location sharing app, and they constantly showed her at Jake's house rather than the eateries she claimed to be frequenting. The GPS tracker data, which showed her car parked at the same apartment every Wednesday and Friday, was then captured on camera. To be safe, I backed everything up to my cloud account and kept it all in a folder on my phone. I was going to dive in with concrete evidence. I considered hiring a private investigator, but I wasn't attempting to construct a solid divorce case because we weren't married. However, I wanted to be sure that she couldn't deny anything. I continued to be foolish as if nothing had happened. She most likely believed that I was unaware of her affair, and to be honest, it only made me angry every time I considered how smug she must have felt. but I was getting ready behind the scenes. I contacted a lawyer to find out my alternatives about the house and her finances. After living together for 7 years, our finances were complicated even though we were unmarried. I had to be careful not to lose what was rightfully mine. I then began gradually shifting stuff out. It started out as tiny private belongings, essential papers, stuff I knew I would need in case things soon got out of hand. After a breakup, I had seen films of people trashing their ex's apartment, and I wasn't going to allow it to happen to me. I wanted to make sure that nothing of value was lost. I did all of this when Amy wasn't present or was too preoccupied with her relationship to pay attention. She didn't realize I was watching her since she was so engrossed in Jake and the illusion she was living. It was just the way I wanted it. I was ready to go without losing anything significant, not only confront her. I wanted to be in control when it came time. I was prepared to take back control after she had been skulking around. This is where things really started to go wrong. I made the decision that enough was enough, and it was time to implement my strategy. I ultimately had to pull the trigger because I was so sick of being around her. By this time, I knew precisely where Amy was going, and she had planned one of her typical Wednesday evenings. She didn't suspect anything because I had told her earlier that week that I would be traveling out of town for a work trip. It was nothing unusual. On Wednesday, she went about her daily business while I packed a few things, left the house, and spent a few hours driving around. In the late evening, I went to Jake's apartment, parked down the street where no one would see me, and waited. After a while, I observed her pull up his driveway, get out, and enter the building as if it were just another ordinary evening. Her location did indeed indicate that she was going there. I approached after waiting a bit longer to ensure they were comfortable. The front door wasn't locked when I slipped out of my car and approached the house. I crept in as stealthily as I could, listening for any noise. The sound emanating from the room was disgusting. Giggling, moaning, everything. Amidst it all, I opened the door and began snapping shots. They both halted when the flash attracted their attention. Staring at me like a deer in headlights, Amy turned pale. Probably worried if I was going to kill him or anything. Jake just sat there. I didn't know if he knew she was seeing someone else. I simply left the house and drove directly to a motel without saying a word. Surprisingly, I felt in control that evening rather than angry. It's terrible when someone cheats on you because it makes you feel helpless, but now I am in control. I, therefore, completed my plan. First, I had already listed the house for sale, which was in my name. I had a potential buyer lined up because I had been preparing for this. The sale was completed only a week and a half after I caught her. The following day, I moved out the last of my belongings. Since that night, she has been phoning me non-stop, but I have ignored her calls. I texted her once saying, "Your belongings are in the garage. The house is going to be sold." I then blocked her number. Get out. I had to ensure she understood what was happening before I left. She didn't know how long I'd known, so I time-stamped the GPS records, screenshots of her in Jake's place, the pictures I took of them in bed, and the receipt from the house sale before I left for good. Everything was taped to the front door. I didn't stop there either. I created a Dropbox link containing all the proof and forwarded it to her parents, sister, and closest friend. They were able to see everything, no excuses or lies. Knowing there would be repercussions for me, I hesitated before sending this final section. But I did. My phone continued to ring later that evening, not only from her but also from both her and my family. I only took calls from my mother. She told me that Amy had been screaming and freaking out over the phone, contacting her and even my dad, and that I had left her with nothing. To reassure my mother, I had to tell her the entire story, the infidelity, the skulking. The reasons behind my actions weren't sudden, they had been developing for some time. Naturally, my mother disapproved of how I handled the situation. She said I should have spoken to Amy rather than making a big deal. But my father? He didn't say much, but I could tell by his voice that he was somewhat pleased with how I handled it. I can only picture how Amy's entire world must have fallen apart when she discovered her family knew the truth and saw everything taped to the front door. Some members of her family have threatened me, while others have begged me to take her back. In an attempt to persuade me that she made a mistake and merits another shot, they have been phoning and texting me. Yes, exactly. I suppose things didn't go as planned with Jake. She could go straight to him now that I'm not involved, but it evidently didn't work out. He most likely fled as soon as the exhilaration of snooping about wore off because all he wanted was the thrill without the fuss. Amy has started using emails lately. Most of them are simply her pleading for another opportunity, expressing her typical apologies and regrets. Some even attempt to place the blame on me, claiming that I should welcome her back or that it's my fault that she cheated because I wasn't moving quickly enough toward marriage and children. I hardly read the emails to see what she's saying before deleting them. I've lost nearly 10 years of my life, time I'll never get back. Everything seems gloomy right now, and it looks as if I will always be alone. However, I have faith that things will improve in due time. Leaving the proof at her front door seemed appropriate because I wanted her to realize the full scope of my knowledge and the repercussions of her behavior. Given the complexity of our shared lives, it was crucial to contact a lawyer as soon as possible. It was challenging to navigate the pain while defending my interests, but I felt it was the right thing to do. Quickly selling the house was calculated to avoid constantly dealing with reminders of our relationship. Her family's response was brutal. They attempted to guilt me into making amends, but I told myself that I should put my own healing first and that it was not my duty to appease them. Have you ever found hints that took you in a different direction and made you regret what you saw? That concludes the video for today. We appreciate your participation in this discussion. Please comment below if you could relate to this story or have any personal experiences to share. Remember to click the subscribe button and enable notifications to ensure you always get all new stuff. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more tales and ideas. We appreciate your time and hope to see you at the next one.